In the deep timeline of human history, there are stories that, when mentioned, make the human heart seem to stop for a brief moment. Not because they were woven from imagination, but because they truly happened, leaving traces that have existed for thousands of years as a silent warning for anyone clear-headed enough to see them. And right now, as you are watching this video, I want you to picture a land where sunlight once reflected off towering cliffs, where laughter, conversation, and the daily life of a mighty civilization once echoed. A place where today, when people walk in, all they can hear is the chilling silence of stone blocks that have lain there for millennia. It was in that very place that a nation which once stood proudly under the open sky was wiped out in a single brief moment. And the question that keeps people from looking away from this story is this: what could possibly cause a community with such power, wealth, intelligence, and technology far ahead of its time to be destroyed that quickly? Welcome to Prophetic History Explained. That nation was Thamud, a people whose physical stature was so great that ancient records describe that when they walked, the ground seemed to echo with the heavy sound of their strength. They lived in the region of Hijr in the northwest of the Arabian Peninsula, where modern archaeologists can still find mountain faces carved out completely to make homes, so solid that no storm or flood of that time could touch them. These stone homes were not simple caves. They were true palaces, carved with such architectural detail and technical precision that many modern researchers still cannot explain how ancient people were able to do it. But the solidity of those structures could not hide the growing weakness inside their hearts. When people possess too much physical strength, too much intelligence, too many resources, and too much admiration from neighboring tribes, they begin to believe that everything they have was created by their own hands. They forget that every stone they chiseled, every valley they cultivated, every drop of water they drank was a blessing that was sent down to them. And when the heart begins to drift away from the one who created it, arrogance will grow day by day until it swallows all reason. The people of Thamud did not just use the mountains to build homes, they used them to assert their power. They looked at their solid houses and told themselves, "Nothing can touch us, even nature must bow to our strength." And when that self-satisfaction reached its peak, they began to worship the very things their own hands had made. They bowed to stone idols, they idolized their own wealth, and they became slaves to the very things they owned. The most frightening part was not how many gods they worshipped, but that they believed they themselves had risen above the limits of being human. Yet what makes the story of Thamud almost unbelievably chilling is that they had already witnessed the destruction of the people of Ad, their own ancestors, who had also been granted extraordinary strength and wealth but were destroyed by a fierce windstorm because of their arrogance. Even so, Thamud chose to repeat the exact same mistake, as if they did not care at all about the fate of those who came before them. If you have ever stood in the region of Hijr and looked at those massive stone houses towering dozens of meters high, roughly 65 to 100 feet, which is about 20 to 30 meters, you would understand why they became so arrogant. Those structures did not look like anything else in the world at that time. They seemed almost immortal. They made people feel as if they could exist forever. But that very feeling was the poison that ate away at their hearts day by day, making them believe that they no longer needed the mercy of Allah. When a community forgets the true source of the blessings that they enjoy, they lose the ability to recognize the warning signs. And that is exactly when tragedy begins to unfold. Thamud did not realize that they were walking along a path that, once they crossed a certain point, they would never be able to turn back from. If you want to hear the full story behind the terrifying rise and fall of this nation, make sure to subscribe to the channel so that Prophetic History Explained has the motivation to continue bringing more meaningful and profound videos. What happens next in this story will make you unable to stop watching. From the midst of this powerful community of Thamud, where people were proud of what they had built and believed that no force could touch them, Allah sent to them a man they knew very well, Salih. He was not a stranger from another land, nor a wandering nomad passing through the valley to preach. Salih was born and raised among them from a noble family, well-educated, intelligent, upright in character, and seen by the entire tribe as someone who would lead them in the future. The people of Thamud saw in him the qualities of a young leader who could resolve disputes, make wise decisions, and carry a calm composure that very few people had. That is why when Salih declared that he had been chosen by Allah as a messenger, the entire community was shocked. They could not understand why someone with such a bright future would abandon every opportunity in order to bring them a message that they did not want to hear. His call was very simple: worship Allah alone, the one who had given them life, land, strength, and the ability to build structures that amazed the entire world. Do not follow idols carved by human hands. Do not chase the arrogance that had led previous nations to be punished. And do not spread chaos, injustice, and oppression of those who were weaker in their community. Salih told them that what they possessed was not a sign that they could never be destroyed. On the contrary, it was a test to see whether they would be grateful, humble, and able to keep their hearts pure. However, that warning made them angry. In their eyes, Salih had betrayed the traditions of their ancestors and the ideals that the community had placed upon him. They once believed that one day he would be the leader who would bring Thamud into an even more prosperous era. But now he was telling them to abandon the path they believed was right. Some people openly said that he was deluded, that he was under a spell or under the influence of some sort of magic. They could not accept that a man from the highest social class of their tribe was asking them to change beliefs that had existed for generations. But beneath that anger was something else: the fear of losing control. If Salih really was a messenger, if what he said was true, then that meant they had to give up a way of life that gave them power and status. It meant they no longer had absolute control. It meant that the richest and most powerful among them would have to face the warning that they must live with justice and humility. And that, to them, was harder to accept than anything else. Even so, Salih never responded with anger. He spoke to them with patience, reminding them that Allah had given them land to cultivate, water to use, health to work, and knowledge to build their grand structures. And when Allah grants something, He can also take it away if people become arrogant. Salih emphasized that his mission was not to become a king, not to receive gold, silver, or power from them. He did not ask for payment or tribute. All he wanted was the acknowledgement that there is only one who deserves to be worshipped and obeyed. But no matter how gentle he was, the opposition remained fierce. The leaders of the tribe, who owned the land, the soldiers, and the reputation, were afraid that Salih's teachings would change the entire social order. They began to sow doubt and spread lies that Salih was trying to seize power, that he was plotting to destroy the civilization of Thamud. These baseless accusations, repeated often enough, eventually made many people believe that Salih was a threat, not a savior sent to rescue them from a dark future. The innocent ones, the powerless ones, the ones who once respected Salih, now turned their backs on him, simply because they were swept along by the crowd. They did not want to be seen as those who went against tradition. They did not want to look like they were siding with a prophet if that meant losing their social status. They chose silence, and silence, while truth is being twisted, is also a form of complicity. And when gentle reminders no longer seemed to work, they decided to put Salih to the test. They demanded that he provide a sign, a clear proof that he truly was the messenger of Allah. To them, this was not only a challenge, but a way to destroy his credibility in front of everyone. They believed that no one could meet the outrageous demands they were about to make. They believed this would be the moment they could expose him and prove that his words were nothing but illusions. None of them knew that the test they were about to set would become the beginning of the greatest tragedy in the history of the tribe of Thamud. The challenges that the people of Thamud hurled at Salih did not come from a sincere desire to find the truth. They were the last weapon of a community desperately clinging to a false belief in order to protect its own arrogance. When they demanded that he present a sign to prove his mission, they never considered that their request might actually be granted. On the contrary, they believed that they had trapped Salih. To them, this was the way to force him into silence, to prove that he was nothing more than a liar trying to manipulate the community. But Salih was not shaken. He replied that if they truly wanted a sign, he would pray and ask Allah to send one. He reminded them that miracles are not in the hands of human beings, but only occur when Allah wills them to. And at that very moment, the arrogance of the people of Thamud led them to make a move they never imagined would bring about the downfall of their entire nation. Together they came up with a demand that they were certain no one could ever fulfill. They pointed to a massive rock in the middle of the valley, a solid block that only hammers and time could affect, and they set the challenge. If you are truly a messenger, make that rock split open, and from inside it a female camel must emerge. But that was not all. Afraid that this condition was still not difficult enough, they began to add more and more impossible requirements. The camel had to be female. It had to be pregnant. It had to have a unique color that had never been seen before. It had to be so enormous that it surpassed every other camel in the region. It had to be able to drink all the water of the valley in a single day. And it had to produce enough milk to feed the entire community. Every condition they added was meant as mockery, as a test they believed would expose Salih's helplessness. Salih listened to all of it, and when they finished listing their demands, he asked, "If what you asked for happens exactly as you described, will you believe?" They immediately answered that they would, but deep down they believed it would never happen. That overconfidence pushed them closer to a proof they would never be able to deny. When Salih began to pray, every eye turned to the rock. No one dared to breathe too loudly, and the silence felt as heavy as the rocks surrounding the valley. Then the unimaginable took place. The rock began to tremble, echoing with a sound like the cracking of the earth itself. Fractures spread across it like lightning bolts tearing through the sky, and then a bright opening appeared in the center of that massive stone. From inside, a female camel stepped out, exactly matching every detail they had described. It was so large that its shadow covered the ground where it stood. And just as they had demanded, it was pregnant. Its color was strange and striking, and each step it took caused the valley to quiver. Those who witnessed it were stunned to the point that many stepped back in fear. Some fell to the ground, unable to understand what was happening before their eyes. Those whose hearts were still stubborn tried to rationalize it as some kind of sorcery, but they could not deny the scale of the miracle, nor could they explain how every detail that they themselves had specified appeared so precisely. Meanwhile, those with purer hearts understood that this was no ordinary event. They immediately believed that Salih truly was a messenger. From the day the camel appeared, life among the people of Thamud changed dramatically. Allah set a rule to test them. One day all the water of the valley would be for the camel, and the next day it would be for the people. On its day, the camel drank all the water, something no one thought was possible. And on the days when the people drew water, they received not only water but also milk from that camel, enough for the entire community. It became a living miracle among them, appearing every day, standing as a visible sign that Salih's warning was completely true. As time passed, the people of Thamud began to witness more strange things surrounding the camel. Whenever it walked, other animals scattered. Whenever it appeared, people whispered to one another about the real meaning of this miracle. Some began to soften and think more deeply about Salih's call. But at the same time, the jealousy and hostility inside the hearts of the powerful grew even stronger. They saw Salih's influence increase every day. They saw the faith of the people shifting toward him, and they feared that their authority would soon collapse. The very miracle they had once demanded with mockery now became a threat to their power. Out of that envy, a dark plot began to form. A plot that they believed would restore the power they felt slipping away piece by piece. They had no idea that this plan would open the door to their complete destruction. The appearance of the miraculous camel did not make the people of Thamud better, as it should have. Instead, it revealed clearly the two sides of their community. Those who were humble began to believe in Salih, while those who were arrogant became even more furious. They could not bear to see such an obvious sign every day and still pretend that nothing had happened. To them, that miracle was not a reminder, but a thorn in their pride. It weakened their lies and it shook the authority they had built for many years. While the followers of Salih increased, the hatred of the powerful grew many times over. Some among them began to think that there was only one way to extinguish Salih's influence: destroy the sign that Allah had sent. They whispered among themselves in the shadows, afraid that if they allowed this situation to continue, they would lose control and lose the position that had allowed them to stand above the rest of the tribe. From those whispers, a plan took shape, not from the entire community, but from a group that the Quran describes as the worst troublemakers among them. 9 men who were cruel, violent, and no longer able to distinguish right from wrong. These men knew that touching a miracle of Allah was extremely dangerous, but their hatred had blinded them. They did not think about the consequences. They did not think about the nations that had been destroyed before them. They did not think about Salih's warnings. They only thought about reclaiming their dominance. They began to spread lies to convince the people that the camel was the source of all their troubles, that sharing water with it was unfair, that the changes in their daily life were signs of destruction, not of a miracle. Over time, the mindset of the crowd began to shift. Many in the tribe did not dare to oppose the ruling group, and they did not have the courage to stand with Salih. So they chose silence. That silence in the face of a great crime was the most dangerous form of complicity. They knew that killing the camel was wrong, but they did not speak up. They knew it was a sign from Allah, but they allowed a few evil men to decide the fate of the entire community. A nation began to retreat in front of wrongdoing, and when people step back for long enough, the worst will happen. On the night before the crime was carried out, those 9 cowardly men lay in ambush at the foot of the mountain where the camel usually came to drink or graze on fresh grass. The moonlight on the cliff faces made the whole scene eerily still. They hid behind rocks, gripping their weapons tightly, their hearts pounding, not out of fear of Allah, but out of excitement for the plan they were about to execute. When the camel appeared, its shadow stretched across the ground like a being from another world. Instead of trembling before a miracle, they rushed at it with brutality. A powerful strike to its leg brought the camel crashing down. The sound it let out echoed through the valley like the cry of an innocent creature witnessing the betrayal of those it had been sent to warn. That cry shook the ground so much that people back in the settlement could hear it, yet no one ran out to stop what was happening. The baby camel heard its mother's cry and ran up the mountain in panic, but it was chased and slaughtered just as mercilessly. When the crime was done, the 9 men rejoiced and brought the camel's meat back to share with the community. The most frightening part was that the people of Thamud ate it. as if declaring that they were willingly standing on the side of that crime. When Salih heard the news, he ran there immediately. He saw pieces of flesh still scattered on the ground, bloodstains across the rocks, and the mocking looks in people's eyes. The pain in his heart was not for the camel, but because he knew that the sin they had just committed had closed the door to any return. He cried, not because of loss, but because he understood that punishment had now become certain. With a voice heavy with sorrow, he told them that they had only 3 days left on this earth. 3 days to live, and then everything would end. But that warning only made them more arrogant. They laughed at him and challenged him to bring the punishment immediately. They believed they were still untouchable, that their stone houses would protect them from any danger. That night, the 9 murderers even plotted together to kill Salih and his family, thinking that if they could eliminate the messenger, they would escape the fate of destruction. They did not know that while they were plotting, Allah already knew everything. And when human beings decide to destroy the very sign that He sent to warn them, what they are actually destroying is their own future. 3 days later, the signs began to appear one by one, their faces changing color. And the long silence before the final storm was only the fateful pause before a punishment that no one could stop anymore. When Salih delivered his final warning, a heavy stillness covered the land of Hijr like an invisible curtain that no one could lift. The people of Thamud still did not understand how close they were standing to the edge of the abyss. They treated the 3 days that Salih mentioned as a joke, an empty threat. But the silence of the earth and sky at that time was actually a death bell, ringing very softly yet clearly enough for anyone who still had a bit of clarity in their heart. On the first day, the people of Thamud woke up and found that their faces had turned pale yellow, like leaves about to wither. Some looked at each other with doubt, but most brushed it off as a coincidence. However, when they caught the painful look in Salih's eyes, a very light but sharp uneasiness slid through their hearts. Even so, their arrogance made them pretend that nothing was wrong. On the second day, their faces turned red, so obvious that no one could continue lying to themselves. Fear began to creep in. The mocking words from the day before disappeared, replaced by anxious whispers. But true panic did not hit until the sun rose on the 3rd day. At that moment, their faces turned as dark as ashes, and no one could hide the terror spreading through their eyes. Those who had once loudly challenged Salih suddenly became silent, trembling as they looked at one another, because they understood that the judgment they had laughed at had now become an unavoidable reality. Exactly at the time when the sun was just beginning to rise on the 4th day, when fear had just sunk deep enough into their hearts, the punishment came. It was not a storm, not any natural disaster that human beings had seen before, but a sound, a terrifying scream from the sky, so powerful that it shook not only the ground, but also the chests of those who were standing. That scream was unlike any sound in this world. It was sharp and cold, tearing through the air like an arrow released from the hand of an angel. In a brief instant, when that sound reached the deepest part of their bodies, their internal organs felt crushed. Their hearts felt as if an invisible force had smashed them. No one had the chance to cry out. No one had the chance to run. They collapsed on the solid rocky ground they had once been so proud of, dying in frozen poses like lifeless statues. Their stone houses, the structures they believed were stronger than anything in the world, remained standing and watched as their owners fell. The walls did not collapse, but the people who had bragged about their strength turned to nothing like dust. That contrast was the clearest message. No building, no technology, no wealth can save human beings when their hearts turn away from the one who created them. Salih and those who believed had left that land under Allah's command before the punishment came. When they returned, all they saw was a dead city. There were no human voices, no laughter, no animals, no sign of life at all. The stone houses stood still like giant tombs. The wind that passed through the cracks in the rock sounded like the sighs of history. In that space, Salih looked at the lifeless bodies and said with sorrow in his voice, "O my people, I delivered to you the message of my Lord. I advised you, but you did not like those who give advice." Time passed and other civilizations appeared and disappeared, but the traces of Thamud remained. Centuries later, when Rasulullah led his companions past Al-Hijr, he lowered his head and urged his camel to move faster. He did not want to remain in that place of punishment even for a single long breath. Some of the companions drew water from the wells of Thamud to cook, and when he learned of it, Rasulullah told them to pour the water away, break the bread and feed it to their camels. He reminded them that this was not a place to admire ancient beauty, but a place to weep for the fate of those who resisted the truth. He said, "Do not enter such places unless your hearts are filled with fear, because these ruins were preserved for you to learn from, not for you to admire." The final lesson from the story of Thamud is a truth that human beings in every era must remember. Strength can make people arrogant, knowledge can make them proud, achievement can make them think that they are untouchable. But those very things, when they are no longer tied to gratitude and reverence for Allah, become a double-edged sword that cuts down their own destiny. Thamud proved that a nation can stand very high, but if they turn their backs on the one who gave them all that strength, they will fall in a moment shorter than a single breath. The way to apply this lesson in our lives today is extremely practical. Whenever you achieve something, ask yourself whether you are becoming arrogant like the people of Thamud. Whenever you feel stronger than someone else, remember that strength is not a reason to look down on anyone, but a test to see whether you can use it correctly. And whenever you are faced with a reminder, whether it comes from religion, from life, or from an unexpected event, always keep your heart open, because sometimes that small nudge is what saves you from a much greater mistake. If you want to continue exploring deep historical stories, lessons from past nations, and events from the unseen world that we often overlook, join the Prophetic History Explained community to receive more beneficial and valuable knowledge. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel to support this journey of bringing you honest, profound, and meaningful content in the upcoming videos.